Welcome to The Debate. Society tells men to cry. It tells them to open up and be vulnerable. But ask any man what actually happens when he breaks down in front of the world, and you'll hear a terrifying story. Tonight, we explore the myth of Samson and the psychological horror of being betrayed the exact moment you show your weakness.
It really is an uncomfortable reality.
Yeah, it is. So today we're diving into a deeply controversial question that, clinical psychologists are wrestling with right now. Is the modern societal directive for men to open up and express their feelings a genuine path to healing, or is it a devastating psychological snare?
And it's a snare that a lot of men are falling into right now.
Exactly. Now, I take the side of modern psychology here. I argue that this mandate for men to express their vulnerability is a necessary evolutionary step forward for our society. Maintaining that invincible armor is what truly destroys men from the inside out.
Right. And, well, I look at the exact same clinical data, and I take the opposing view. Dropping this armor is a naive and, frankly, highly dangerous trap, because the reality, not the utopian ideal, but the messy, lived reality, demonstrates that society secretly punishes men the very moment they reveal their weakness.
Okay, but to understand why breaking this stoic mold is so critical, we can't just talk about feelings in the abstract. We have to look at the actual biological and psychological mechanisms of emotional suppression.
Sure, let's look at the biology.
Right. Because for generations, we've socialized men to act as these unfeeling pillars. The expectation is that a man must absorb stress, trauma, anxiety, without ever letting it fracture his exterior. But emotions aren't just invisible thoughts, right? They are physiological events.
They are processed in the nervous system?
Exactly. When a man forces himself to constantly swallow his fear or his grief, that energy doesn't evaporate. It triggers a chronic sympathetic nervous system response. His body is literally flooded with cortisol.
Which takes a massive physical toll.
A huge toll. Over time, that metastasizes. It physically damages the cardiovascular system, it suppresses the immune system, and, psychologically, it turns into severe depression and explosive anger.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the physical toll of stress.
So that's why I look at emotional armor not as a shield, but as a trap. Think of it like a suit of iron worn in a rainstorm. Every time a man swallows his anger at work, or every time he hides a deep fear from his wife, that's a drop of rain.
That's an interesting way to frame it.
Yeah, because over decades, the suit doesn't just get heavy, the joints rust shut. He literally loses the neurological pathways required to articulate his feelings. Opening up is the only way to take the suit off, break that rust, and actually survive.
Well, the rusted iron suit metaphor is incredibly poetic. And biologically, you're right about the cortisol, but my issue is that your perspective fundamentally ignores what happens the very second that iron suit hits the floor.
What do you mean?
I'm looking at this through the lens of what modern clinical psychologists call the Samson Trap.
Oh, drawn from the biblical story of Samson and Delilah.
Precisely. For those who aren't familiar, Samson was a man of invincible, God-given strength. He was the ultimate protector, a warrior, completely unyielding. And his only rule, the very secret to his power, was that he must never cut his hair.
Right, the famous vow.
Right. And for a long time, he succeeds. He's the pillar his society needs. But then he falls in love with Delilah. And what does she do? She constantly pressures him to show his true self. She begs him to drop the facade, to trust her with his deepest secret.
Wait, so in this clinical framework, his secret, his hair, is literally just a metaphor for his vulnerability?
Exactly. It is his one point of genuine fragility. And when he finally opens up and shows that true vulnerability to the woman he loves, the result isn't healing. It isn't a deeper, beautiful intimacy.
She betrays him.
She immediately betrays him. His hair is cut, his eyes are gouged out, and he is enslaved by his enemies. This isn't just some ancient myth. It is a chilling, perfectly accurate parallel to the contemporary male experience.
That is a very dark view of modern relationships.
But it's accurate. Society begs men to take off the armor, but when they actually drop it, the trap snaps shut. We are encouraging men to expose their throats in a world that still has fangs.
I see why the Samson Trap resonates. I really do, because it paints a very visceral picture. But let's talk about the reality of those fangs. You suggest society is just waiting to devour men who show weakness, but we are in the middle of a massive paradigm shift.
Are we, though?
We are. Genuine partners and colleagues today actually want men to show their humanity. Intimacy, by its very definition, requires mutual exposure. You cannot build a profound romantic connection or a deep, trusting professional relationship if one person is operating as a brick wall.
In theory, yes.
In practice, too. When the rust comes off the suit, what is revealed is a person capable of empathy.
Look, I have to stop you there. Because the clinical reality and the lived experiences of countless men tell a completely different story.
Really? A completely different story?
Yes. You talk about partners wanting men to show their humanity. But let's look at the actual mechanism of what happens when a man breaks down, cries, or admits a deep, paralyzing insecurity to his partner. Her perception of him often alters instantaneously.
Because she sees his pain.
No, and it's not because she's a bad person, it's cognitive dissonance.
Okay, explain what you mean by cognitive dissonance in this specific context.
It's the clash between her logical mind and her evolutionary biology. Her modern prefrontal cortex, the logical brain, has read the articles and says, I want my partner to be vulnerable, this is healthy.
Right.
But her limbic system, the older evolutionary part of her brain, is watching the primary protector of her family unit collapse. It triggers a subconscious panic response.
A panic response just from seeing him cry?
Yes, and that panic often manifests as a visceral reaction of disgust or a sudden, irreversible loss of attraction. She may say she wants him to be vulnerable, but when he is, the foundational dynamic shifts. He goes from being perceived as a reliable pillar to an emotional burden.
Wow. Now, if you're listening to this right now and thinking, well, my husband cries and I love him for it, it makes us closer, I want to validate that. That does happen.
It happens, but it's rare.
But I hear what you're saying, that clinically, that limbic reaction might be the exception, or rather, the rule for many men to face. Still, if a woman experiences that subconscious limbic recoil, isn't that something she needs to work through?
It takes time.
Exactly. So why is the burden entirely on the man to stay locked in a suffocating iron suit, rather than on society to evolve past its outdated evolutionary reflexes?
Because evolution doesn't care about what's fair, and the man is the one who pays the immediate price while society takes centuries to evolve. And, it's not just romantic relationships. Look at the workplace.
Okay, let's look at work.
If a man shows profound emotional vulnerability at work, say he admits he's completely overwhelmed and failing to cope, he is deemed incapable. He gets passed over for promotions because leadership requires stability. And right or wrong, society equates male emotionality with instability.
That's a toxic corporate culture, though.
Maybe, but men are forced to wear this mask of invincibility not out of some toxic male pride, but out of sheer practical survival.
Okay, but what is the alternative here? Let's ground this in a messy, practical reality. If a guy is having a severe panic attack in his office or he's buckling under the weight of a divorce, are you suggesting he literally just bites his lip until his heart gives out?
I'm saying the risks of revealing it are catastrophic.
How is that survival? If a corporate structure punishes a man for admitting he needs help, the solution is not to tell the man to repress his emotions until he suffers a total breakdown. The solution is to reform the HR policies, to change the corporate culture to recognize that asking for help is an actual leadership strength.
That sounds great on paper.
But it's true. We cannot abandon a vital psychological release valve just because a toxic environment temporarily misinterprets it.
Look, I understand the desire to reform the boardroom, but the Samson Trap isn't primarily about corporate culture. Your boss isn't Delilah.
Well, who is then?
The most devastating psychological damage doesn't happen at work. It happens in the living room. It is fundamentally about intimate betrayal.
How so?
Let's look at the psychology of the betrayer. When men open up to their partners, their deepest insecurities are often not protected. They are cataloged.
Cataloged? That's quite a cynical word.
It's what happens. Let's say a man confesses a deep-seated fear of abandonment or a profound insecurity about his financial worth. 3 months later, they are in a heated dispute.
The partner's idealized expectation of him has been shattered. She feels threatened, and as a defense mechanism, she weaponizes that exact secret against him.
To win the argument.
To inflict maximum pain, she uses the very vulnerability he shared to regain the upper hand. The horrific realization of the Samson Trap is that revealing your true self gives the person you love the exact coordinates for a nuclear strike on your psyche.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because you are conflating vulnerability with abuse.
It's human nature.
You're assuming that weaponization is an inevitable law of human nature. It isn't. It is a symptom of an unhealthy relationship. If a man opens up and his partner throws his deepest fears back in his face during a fight, well, he has just gained incredibly valuable, albeit painful information about the character of the person he is with.
But the damage is already done. He's already blind and in chains.
But the goal shouldn't be to retreat back into the iron suit and assume everyone is a threat. The goal should be to find the right people. This is about discernment, right?
Finding the mythical right people.
They exist. Men need to be taught how to navigate their emotional worlds and choose who they share them with. Finding a safe space, a genuinely supportive partner, a solid group of friends, or a competent therapist allows that vulnerability to foster real intimacy without the threat of a nuclear strike.
So just avoid the thorns.
I mean, yeah. You don't stop walking just because you might step on a thorn. You put on better shoes and you watch where you step.
Okay, I see the logic in that. The bad apples defense. This idea that men just need to find the right people and avoid the toxic ones. But it completely ignores the cruelest mechanism of the Samson Trap.
Which is what?
Let's go back to the metaphor. Delilah wasn't an enemy soldier. She wasn't a stranger on the street, and she wasn't some toxic woman Samson casually dated. She was the woman he loved deeply.
Right.
The betrayal in the Samson Trap doesn't come from obvious enemies or bad apples. It comes from the very people who designated themselves as the safe space.
Wait, so you're saying the trap is built into the concept of the safe space itself?
Yes, that is the true psychological horror here. The men experiencing this aren't recklessly oversharing with strangers at a bar. They are opening up to the exact individuals begging them to drop their armor.
They're partners.
Their wives, their long-term partners, the people who look them in the eye and say, "You can tell me anything. I am your safe space. I want you to be vulnerable." And the moment the man finally breaks down, the trap is sprung.
That's a devastating thought.
He is blinded and enslaved by the person who told him it was safe to be weak. Think about the cognitive dissonance that creates for the man. How can you ever trust the concept of a safe space again when the person holding the scissors was the one who asked you to fall asleep in her lap?
I'll admit, the pain of being betrayed by the person you trust most is arguably the deepest psychological wound a human being can experience. I do not diminish the trauma of that moment.
It's life-ruining.
It is. However, I want us to pull back and look at the macro level of what is happening in society right now. We are in a messy, painful transition period. It is sociological whiplash.
Sociological whiplash? What does that mean?
Yes, whiplash. For thousands of years, the roles were rigidly defined. The man protects and provides, the woman nurtures. Now, in the span of maybe 50 years, we are asking both men and women to completely rewrite the scripts of gender, intimacy, and strength.
And it's failing.
No, it's clashing. Yes, there is a clash. A partner might conceptually want a vulnerable man, but possess deeply ingrained subconscious patriarchal expectations, that evolutionary limbic response you mentioned earlier, that causes her to recoil when she actually sees him cry.
Exactly.
That recoil is a societal reflex. It is entirely unfair to the man in that moment. But, the only way we work through that cultural reflex is by continuing to push against it.
So he just takes the hit?
Well, if men retreat back into stoicism the moment they encounter resistance, society will never evolve. The courage required to be vulnerable isn't just about personal healing anymore. It's about leading the culture forward.
Leading the culture forward?
Yes. It takes immense strength to stand in your truth, to express your feelings, knowing you might be misunderstood or even betrayed. but doing it anyway because it is the only authentic way to live.
You are asking men to be collateral damage in a sociological experiment. Listen to what you are saying.
I'm asking for bravery.
You are acknowledging the whiplash, the subconscious recoil, the sudden loss of respect, and the weaponization of their deepest secrets. And your response is essentially keep doing it so society can learn? I find that clinically irresponsible.
It is not irresponsible to advocate for authenticity.
It is when it causes immediate harm. A psychologist's first duty is to the reality of the patient sitting in front of them, not some utopian vision of a future society.
But the long term?
When a man sits in a clinical setting and describes how revealing his emotional pain led directly to his wife losing respect for him, telling him he is just part of a messy transition period does nothing to restore his gouged out eyes.
You're being dramatic.
I'm being realistic. The reality of the Samson Trap proves that human nature has deeply ingrained parameters regarding male capability. When men display helplessness, the foundational security of the relationship fractures. To tell men to ignore this biological reality and blindly drop their defenses is to march them directly into the trap. It isn't courage you are demanding of them. It is a profound and dangerous naivete.
Look, I have to push back hard on the idea that encouraging emotional expression is marching men into a trap. We have hard, empirical data showing the devastating effects of the traditional male script. Let's talk about the real danger here.
All right, let's hear it.
Men commit suicide at vastly higher rates than women. We are looking at an epidemic of male isolation and loneliness. The iron suit you are defending is currently killing people. You speak of the psychological damage of intimate betrayal, which is real. But what about the psychological damage of absolute lifelong isolation?
They aren't isolated if they are functioning members of a family and society.
They are emotionally isolated. What about the tragedy of never being truly known by another human being? The Samson myth is a tragedy, yes, but a life lived entirely behind an impenetrable wall of armor, where a man goes to his grave having never once shown his true face to his wife, his children, or his closest friends. That is an equal, if not greater, tragedy.
It's a heavy burden, yes.
Forward to change this outcome. The risks are real, yes, but the alternative is a guaranteed spiritual death.
And well, I maintain that until human nature fundamentally changes, which it won't in our lifetimes, the real world remains brutal. You view the armor as a prison. I view it as a necessary adaptation to a world that does not forgive male weakness.
So you really think they prefer the armor?
They prefer survival. The Samson Trap is not a myth in the sense of a fairy tale. It is a fundamental human truth encoded in narrative. It proves that revealing true vulnerabilities leads directly to emotional betrayal and a loss of status.
Even with the people they love.
Especially with them. Men who have lived through it don't put the armor back on because they want to be isolated. They put it back on because they have learned a very cold truth. The world respects their utility and their strength, but it has absolutely zero tolerance for their brokenness.
Well, as we synthesize these perspectives, I want to reiterate that the paradigm of the unfeeling, invincible man is an artifact of the past. It's a defense mechanism that has outlived its usefulness.
I obviously disagree.
I know. But yes, stepping out of the armor exposes you to the elements. Yes, the risk of betrayal by the very people you trust is a profound and terrifying reality. But the mandate for men to express their feelings isn't a trap. It is the prerequisite for genuine human connection. The pain of occasional betrayal is the heavy price of admission to a life where you are authentically loved rather than merely relied upon for your utility.
And my position remains that the price of admission you are demanding is one most men cannot afford to pay, and quite frankly, should not have to.
Right.
The sudden loss of respect, the weaponization of insecurities and arguments, the professional demotions, these are the tangible consequences of dropping the mask. Vulnerability is a beautiful concept in a controlled therapeutic environment, but in the wild, it is dangerous. Men are punished for showing weakness, often by the very people who demanded they show it. Advising men to discard their armor without acknowledging the fangs of the world is dangerous.
Which brings us to a chilling realization that we must acknowledge as we close today. As we sit here having this intellectual discourse, Millions of men are walking around right now in complete silence, terrified to share their pain.
Millions of them.
They are carrying immense burdens, suffering through depression, anxiety, and profound loneliness, but they will not speak a word of it. They know the profound truth that the exact moment they let their Delilah hold their secrets, they will be blinded and destroyed. That is the reality of the world we have built.
Exactly. They are silent because they are observant. They have watched it happen to their fathers, to their friends, and to themselves.
While I still believe in the ultimate necessity of breaking down walls, I cannot deny the profound psychological horror of being enslaved by the person who asked you to be weak. We leave you with this to ponder as you navigate your own relationships and the expectations placed upon the men in your life. Keep your armor on, because the people begging you to take it off might just be hiding the scissors.